Good afternoon, everyone. Today we have Michael Grimm. We've been having some technical issues. He's in Latin America right now, and the bandwidth of the internet is not very good. So we're gonna go just on voice today. So, Michael, how are you? Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Julio. I'm good. I'm looking forward to the conversation today. I think we'll have a good show, and I hope people find it useful.
I appreciate it. Thanks for your time here today. We also very appreciate it. Michael, just a short introduction. If you had to characterize who is Michael Grimm, how would you say who is Michael Grimm yourself?
Yeah, so that's actually a good question. I hadn't thought about it that way. I think I'm just a man who's trying to make the world a better place. Really, at the end of the day, I'm trying to do some good things for society and raise awareness and give people good information and make sure that we finance the projects that we need to create a better world for everybody. And so that's my focus. I got into the project finance space, and if you read my bio, I've been involved in financial services the last 17 years. And the reason why I shifted from just doing finance in general, and I was at Nomura, when I made the decision to get into project finance, and the reason why I did that is because I grew up within walking distance of a coal-fired facility, coal-fired power plant that I could see from my bedroom window growing up.
Sure.
And I lost my dad to lung cancer, most likely caused by that coal-fired plant. So it was killing.
I'm very sorry to hear that.
Yeah, he had lived in that neighborhood most of his life, and I could walk to that coal-fired facility. And it turns out, after I did some research, that that coal-fired facility was killing about 35 people a year, right? And so not a lot of people know that we're losing more than 8 million people a year due to premature death due to air pollution caused by fossil fuels. And so that's my primary driver for getting into this space. I'm doing it to save lives more than anything. Lots of people have different motivations, but if you've ever seen somebody die from lung cancer, it's horrible, right? And I decided to get into decarbonization because I didn't want other families to go through kind of what my family went through and what my dad went through in particular. So that was back in 2009, and it took me a little while to get into the project finance space. But since then, I've been focused on helping the world shift to renewable energy.
Remarkable. So, there's a lot of conversations about the climate. During what happened and what does it take to fossil fuel industry continue trying to drive humanity off a cliff? It's kind of like I think people like you and like me and many other people around the world are trying to make a shift. Would you think it's working? And what will be your opinion regarding this? And the proper steps of the world to actually shift in that direction.
Yeah. So I think sort of taking a step back and where we are really is we're at 420 something. I think about 423 parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere, right? And so there's been some level of misinformation for the last 50 years that's pretty well documented as to whether the climate crisis is real or not. So let's start there, right? So the science is really well settled. The greenhouse effect was first observed in the 1800s, right? So this is measurable. It's not guesswork or anything like that. And the fossil fuel industry knew about the effects of carbon on the atmosphere and on global warming, way back in the 1960s and 1970s. And Exxon and the fossil fuel companies actually had the best climate models and the most accurate climate models way back then, right? That accurately predicted the crisis that we're seeing today. So there's a good Harvard study that went through and sort of analyzed the accuracy of the various models. And so Exxon and these guys knew way back 50 years ago that we would
Right.
end up with the situation that we're now in now. And rather than going, hey, our product is causing a real problem, so maybe we need to shift our product and adopt a better product to sell, right? In addition to killing 8 million people a year. So it's like World War II happening silently every year. Rather than try and come up with a better solution, these guys have been actively misinforming everybody for about 50 years. And there are Senate reports that back this up. There's the Union of Concerned Scientists Climate Deception Dossiers, which basically has internal memos from the fossil fuel industry saying exactly what the game plan is. And so the fossil fuel industry hires the PR companies, and the PR companies tell the news organizations what to report and what not to report. Right? And so that's why some people still don't believe that the climate crisis is a thing, even though the science is agreed on by 99.9% of the scientists in the world, right? And so what people are not aware of is what concerns me most, right? It's not general public awareness that James Hansen, for example, is one of the world's best climate scientists, and he's been pretty spot on with things for decades, right? And he's been trying to warn everybody what would happen. He's the former head of NASA's Climate Center. He's over at Columbia University. And he basically published a report recently with his colleagues that said we've got, at this 423 parts per million, we've got about 8 degrees of warming baked into the system, right? And people don't understand, like 8 degrees, what does that matter, right? So are you able to pull up that image that I had in the article that I published recently, the one that shows like the impact at different degrees of warming? Are you able to put that up?
Um, Give me a second. Yeah, please continue. I'll try to put it on as soon as possible.
Yeah, if you don't have it, I have it, so I can
Yeah.
I can do. Here, let me see if I can do it. So basically, this is from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is one of the best, best. I don't know if you can put this image up on screen or not, but it's comprised of like the best and brightest minds around climate research from all over the world, right? And so this is scientists from developing countries as well as developed countries, and these are folks that are not profiting. They're just researchers, right? And so if you look at the various degrees of warming, right, the even the IPCC data sort of stops at around 5.4 degrees, right? And if you look at what happens at 5.4 degrees, or anywhere between 4 and 5.4 degrees, the entire section around the equator, right, all of that purple on the rightmost side, right, that whole area is 365 days out of the year where you can't go outside or you risk dying, right? So that's what happens at 4 degrees, right? Even at 2 to 3 degrees, you've got way too many days where you're at risk of death, and areas like Indonesia and so on. You're at 365 days out of the year where you could potentially die just by going outside, right? And so James Hansen is saying, look, we've got 8 degrees baked in at current carbon levels in the atmosphere, and carbon is increasing rather than decreasing, right? The IPCC, who published this, says that we need to cut carbon emissions 50% by 2030. So every new source of emissions, every new fossil fuel car, gasoline car on the road, every new gas-fired plant that gets built makes the problem worse, not better, and pushes us towards this 5-degree world, right? So even somewhere between 1.7 degrees and 2.3 degrees, you're going to have billions of people moving out of the equatorial region and trying to find someplace that they can survive. We
Right.
have about 30 million refugees globally right now, and most of those people are internally displaced people. So they haven't left their country. It's like internal conflict and things like this, so people don't have homes anymore, right? And even with this, we have what's called a refugee crisis. Now imagine what happens if 3 billion people suddenly trying to move away from the equator just to find some place to live. Society can't handle that, right? And that happens around 2 degrees.
Yeah.
So 8 degrees, it's like you can't imagine. Like the only people who will be surviving are people living in bunkers, like the silo.
We've been seeing the last at least 3-4 years already that many points around the world have increased the temperature significantly, and you cannot survive in that temperature. I mean, for example, just last year there was already 22 points around the world over 55 degrees. I mean, if people who actually make some decisions in introducing programs to reduce carbon dioxide, unless they do it fast, of course. I mean, I've been rephrasing this a lot of times. I don't think there's a possibility of reaching properly 2030. I mean, in some points of the year in some countries, I mean, if you reach over 55 degrees, it's not even possible to be already on the outside. So
right. And so we're seeing it already, right? And this is what people like. So people who deny the fact that we have record average global temperatures that increase, so the record gets broken every year, pretty much for the last 10 years, right? And people, if they want to ignore that data, that's, you can believe whatever you want to believe, but that's not what the data says, right? And to me, like, data matters more than politics, right? So this is the pathway that we're currently on. And, in the article that I put on LinkedIn recently, I talk about the MIT limits to growth model, which a woman by the name of Gaia Harrington, who was at KPMG as a partner at the time, and is with the Club of Rome. She updated this model, right? And the MIT limits to growth model has pretty much accurately predicted. So it was created in the 1970s and got updated in the early 2000s, and has pretty much accurately predicted the course that human civilization has taken over the last several decades, right? And so she updated the model and said, all right, where are we headed, right? If we keep doing things the way that we're doing. And so, basically what the model shows on the business as usual pathway is that, industrial production will basically fall to nothing. We'll consume all of the resources on the planet. There won't be food for people to eat. Global population drops from 8 billion or 9 billion, I think, at the peak, down to about 4 or 5 billion, right? So we'll have 5 billion fewer people on the planet. And if you think you're not going to be one of those people, your odds are actually better of being one of the people who doesn't make it than one of the people who does, right? And so that's the pathway that we're on. And the fossil fuel industry has put us in this situation. And so, it's up to the 8 billion people on the planet who are not part of the fossil fuel industry. The fossil fuel industry employs about 80 million people. And it's up to all of us to do our part to prevent that future from happening. And what is required to enable that is to invest in the good stuff rather than the bad stuff, right? And we need to do that a lot more quickly than we're doing now, right? And so, what is the good stuff? What can actually prevent that future from happening, right? And according to the IPCC and the scientists, we've got about a 14% chance remaining of averting the worst of the climate crisis, right? And so, what's the stuff that we can build? If you can put up the second image that I've shared there now. um, this is the stuff that can actually solve the problem, right? So the stuff with the longer line, right? The solar, wind, like those long lines are the ones that can have a major impact, right? So we need to build more renewable energy. We need to reduce the destruction of natural ecosystems and deforestation, right? We need to do better agricultural practices to sequester more carbon in agriculture, right? So there's a lot of solutions, and we know what the solutions are, and we know about how much it's going to cost in order to solve the problem and what needs to get built. So there's a lot of myths out there as to what why are we not solving this problem, and what it really boils down to is it's a human resources issue more than anything, right? Like people think it's not enough money, right? So according to Bloomberg New Energy Finance, we need to be investing about $5.3 trillion a year in this stuff in order to solve the climate crisis, right? And we need to be doing that immediately, but we're only investing about $1.7 trillion a year in this stuff. And so, we're about a third of the way to solving the climate crisis than what we need to do. And so people go, well, 5.3 trillion, like I don't even make, whatever, $100,000 a year. Where are we going to come up with 5.3 trillion? And the answer to that is actually, so number one, the fossil fuel industry is getting subsidized to the tune of $7 trillion a year, if you count externalities, right? And number two, so we're putting more money into the good stuff, or into the bad stuff, the fossil fuels, than we are into the stuff that could actually save civilization, right?
Michael, why do you think, despite that everyone, of course, that is in charge is aware that this change needs to be made, why do you think they're still putting money in actually fossil fuels instead of going on sustainable?
Yeah, it's inertia and greed and short-term thinking, right? So there's a lot of the fossil fuel industry. I actually wrote to the CEO of Shell at the time a couple of years back and
Sure.
said, look, hey, your business model, right? You're going to destroy civilization and have no customers left unless we solve this problem, right? You could be making money investing in renewable energy instead, right? And so the automobile industry, right? Everybody used to go around in horses and buggies. And, then the automobile got created, and it was the better technology for society, right? And so the horse and buggy industry had about 10,000 companies or more at the time, right? Most of those companies tried to resist this technological innovation. And those companies that fought tooth and nail to defend the buggy industry, those companies are now all gone. They don't exist, right? But companies like General Motors, who switched from manufacturing buggies to manufacturing automobiles, became a major power, right?
Right.
And so the fossil fuel industry is faced with the same choice, but it's much more dire, right? Like if they continue on the pathway they're on, they'll have no more customers, right? If they switch to renewable energy, fossil fuels go away, but they can still continue as energy companies by providing clean energy that's good for the world, right? That's the choice that's in front of the fossil fuel industry. And if you look at if you include the social cost of carbon, no fossil fuel industry for the last decade has actually been profitable. They're all bankrupt if you include the social cost of carbon, right? So fossil fuel companies are a bad investment. But they've got a lot of money and power and wealth right now and political influence. And so they're using that power and influence to continue lying to people and encouraging people to continue doing things as usual. So it's very short-term thinking. It's greed motivated, right? It's not good for society.
So I guess my point in there would be for them, of course. It's not a matter of short thinking. It's a matter that we all live in the same planet. and in the end, the effect's going to be for all, not just for some.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, you can debate you as humans you can debate all you want, but at the end of the day, the laws of physics
yeah,
are what matter, right?
yeah,
So opinions don't matter, data matters, facts matter, right? Um, so yeah, it's unfortunate we're in the situation we're in, but we still have a shot if we all work together. If we all say, hey, I'm going to stop using fossil fuels to the extent possible, right? Like I'm going to get an electric vehicle. I'm going to use an electric stove. I'm not going to use gas heating. I'm going to get a heat pump, right? Like we as consumers have a lot of power to just say, no, I'm not going to use fossil fuels anymore, right? There's lots of other solutions that are available. And this was my message to the project finance industry, which I'm a part of.
right.
Uh, that there's about 100,000 people, less than that, on the planet who understand project finance and how to structure these big wind and solar projects, right? Which are cheaper, which save lives, which can actually provide better grid stability than fossil fuel projects can. Like there's less than 100,000 people on the planet who know how to structure these projects. And that's the problem, right? Like it's not lack of money. There's over $4.5 quadrillion of money moving from one person to the other in the global economy, right? So 5.3 trillion, or the climate funding gap, the difference between what we're actually investing and what we need to invest is about $3 trillion. That's less than 10 cents out of every $100. So we're going to risk the entire $4.5 quadrillion global economy because we're not mobilizing 10 cents out of every $100 to solve the problem. So it's ludicrous, right?
Yeah.
We just need to mobilize that money. And the problem, if you break it down, is really not one of a lack of money or a lack of technology. You can see we know what we need to build and how to build it. We've got the technology already, right? What it is it's a human resources issue. So there aren't enough bodies. I, as a project financier, I can support maybe 7 active deals at one time. And, we have to triple the number of projects that are in the market that are bankable in order for us to invest $5.3 trillion a year, right? So we have 1.7 trillion being invested. We need to invest 5.3 trillion. So it's about 3 times as many projects. It is physically impossible for me to support, 21 projects.
No, of course.
Right? There's not enough hours in the week, right? And so that's the problem. And we need to do it immediately. We need to get 3 times as many renewable energy projects into the market that are bankable, that banks will actually put money into immediately if we're going to solve the climate funding gap. And so that's actually what we're working on at Sponsor, is enabling the industry to be a lot more efficient and for people to get up to speed more quickly so we can actually get 3 times as many deals or more into the market so that people can actually finance them, right? So on a project finance, the way project finance works, right? So, I did Vineyard Wind, for example. That was a project finance deal. That's a $2.8 billion offshore wind project, the first offshore wind project of a utility scale to get to financial close or raise bank debt, basically, in the United States, right? $2.8 billion project done on a project finance basis. And so with project finance, what happens is you create a special purpose vehicle. And then the banks, the special purpose vehicle is a new company, right, that executes a lot of agreements with other parties, like the utility or whoever's buying the electricity will execute a power purchase agreement. You have all these different contracts that govern the project, and on the strength of the counterparties involved and the strength of those contracts, banks will put in somewhere between 70% to 90% of the debt in the form of long-term loans. Like in the United States, we've got mini perms, but around the world, loans can extend up to like 20 years, right? And that's most of the capital. So convincing a bank to lend into one of these projects with a new company and everything, you have to have everything, structured really, really well and risks allocated in the best way possible and all of this stuff, right? And so it's really complex. The contracts, like a single contract, can stretch into the hundreds of pages, and you'll have like a dozen contracts involved in one of these deals, right? So
Right.
getting the structuring right is really difficult, and that's what's holding us back, right? There's not enough people to structure enough projects to close the climate funding gap.
Right. Right. And I mean, you just mentioning regarding people. Do governments and countries ready for this shift? And if not, what would be the ability, or what do they need to do in order to get these more projects running?
Yeah, so I think so. I think a lot of governments think that the budget for these projects has to come from taxpayer dollars. It doesn't, right? So if you use project finance, then 100% of the capital can come from the private sector, right? The banks put in 70 to 90%, and then the investors put in 10% to 30%, right? And so government funds are not actually required to make these projects happen. And solar and wind are the cheapest forms of electricity around the world right now in most locations. And so, part of the problem is a lack of awareness of the fact that project finance is a solution that can help get this infrastructure built, and what are the benefits if countries do so. So, Mark Jacobson, who's a PhD in engineering and the head of Stanford's civil engineering program, for the last decade or so, has been showing how countries can shift to what he calls wind, water, solar, right, which is basically 100% renewable energy. If he studied about 149 countries, showed grid stability, under the energy mix that he identified for each country or region for years at a time. And he quantified the benefits, right? And so for 149 countries in the world, cumulatively, there would be a net gain of jobs of 22 million jobs, more jobs gained than lost, right? End use energy would reduce by about 50%. Energy costs would reduce by about 50%, right? You'd prevent 5 million premature deaths per year.
Right.
And you reduce the health costs and climate costs and energy costs in total by about 90%, right? So clearly that is a much better pathway and better results than 5 billion people dying and industrial production dropping to nothing and there being no food and no jobs, right? Clearly what Mark Jacobson is proposing is a better pathway, but governments don't realize that, right? So there's a knowledge gap. Governments think, how are we going to come up with enough money to build renewable energy projects, right? And the answer is you don't need to. The money can come from the private sector. Right. And, but aren't we going to lose a lot of jobs? Like some countries will lose some jobs, but most countries have a net gain of jobs, right? Like the vast majority have a large gain of jobs by shifting to renewables, right? So it stimulates economic growth, more jobs, cleaner air, cleaner water. A renewable energy economy requires 1/500th the level of mining and extraction as a fossil fuel-based economy. So we do less destruction to the environment. We have more jobs. People have more money in their wallets because energy costs are 50% less and they're using less energy, right? And so that shift to decarbonization is better for everybody except for the fossil fuel industry, right? And for the fossil fuel industry, it's a simple shift to technology, right? It could be good for the fossil fuel industry. The fossil fuel industry could profit from these projects. And instead, the fossil fuel industry is risking the entire global economy and everybody's health just to stick with an old technology.
Right. Right. And I mean, just to continue this step, what's really holding us back? I mean, what do you think is holding us back in the matter of, to get that penetration of the fossil fuel companies and everyone working around it, to that clear path to sustainability?
Yeah, so I think part of it is the people need to build knowledge. Like look at the data, look at the facts, look up Mark Jacobson's research. Don't buy the misinformation and disinformation. Like read the climate deception dossiers. Like start there and see how humanity has been deceived for the last 50 years, right? So start there, get educated, right? And then tell your politicians, look, I want the better pathway, right? Like I want the future where we have more jobs, right? Where people can eat, where we have clean air and less people are dying, right? And vote for the politicians who are saying no to fossil fuels, right?
Yep.
And your vote matters. How you spend your money, every dollar that each person spends is a vote, right? So what if your next car, don't buy a fossil fuel car, right? Send a clear message to the industry that you want electric vehicles. That's a choice that you can make as an individual, and you can elect politicians who are saying no to fossil fuels, right? So that's part of it. So misinformation and disinformation are holding us back. Political will is holding us back.
Right.
Uh, you know, uh, Short-term thinking and greed. So a lot of politicians get bribed. In the U.S., we call them campaign contributions. There's a great site called opensecrets.org, so you can see which industries are donating to which political candidates. Right? Don't vote for the candidates who are getting lots of money from the fossil fuel industry. Vote for the opposition. Right? And
but can a company, can a private company, can actually donate directly to a political party?
yeah, there's lots of ways to do it. So yeah, go to opensecrets.org. It's pretty enlightening.
Right.
Yeah. And so we can solve the political will problem when politicians realize that if they're supporting this industry that's not just letting 8 million people die per year, but there have been 2,000 activists that have been killed over the last decade, outright, just murdered. Right? That this is it. It's evil. What's been happening, and so if people stop tolerating that and say enough is enough, right? We can still steer the ship away from the iceberg. Right? We're all on the Titanic right now. We've seen the iceberg coming for 50 years. And the fossil fuel industry is saying full steam ahead. Everybody else needs to be saying, no, we're turning away from the iceberg now, because we don't want to sink, right? And so it's this political will. It's how you spend your money. And for the project financiers, like these are the people who enable new LNG projects or extraction projects to happen, right? If the project financiers said, I'm not going to do it anymore. And this is a decision I made 10 years ago, right? I said, I am not going to support any fossil fuel projects. I'm only going to support the good stuff. I'm not going to support the bad stuff. And that at that time was a really difficult, I was going up against like people didn't realize how bad the climate crisis was. People, were like, it's still fine. LNG is a bridge fuel, right? And so I got all kinds of backlash, right? Today, we know that LNG is 33% worse than coal on a life cycle emissions basis. And so there's really nothing to hide behind at this point, right? And it should be a lot easier for people to say, no, not going to support any fossil fuel deals anymore. And if that happens, we stop increasing our emissions, right? So the problem doesn't get any worse at that point, if all of the project financiers say, I'm not going to do fossil fuels anymore, right? So we stop the problem from getting worse. And then if those people put their time and effort into structuring good renewable energy projects and these climate mitigation projects that you see on the screen, right? Then we start getting enough bankable deals into the market to actually start reducing emissions, right? And that's what we need to be pushing for. And
Yeah,
so
we keep seeing, the humanity subsidizing the fossil fuels industry almost 7 trillion a year, rather than the putting it on the climate sustainability. And there's a lot of political and financial dynamics around it. I mean,
Mhm.
is this system actually keeping in place? You think is going to change, and if so, what changes should be made to shift this trajectory that the planet's still having?
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying, so it's all individual choice, right? Each of us is choosing at any given point in time what we put our money into, what we put our time into, and collectively, people might think like, oh, I'm just one person. What I do doesn't really matter, but it's like raindrops in a bucket. You get enough raindrops, and then it matters, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so, you know, like,
Yeah, I usually say if everyone puts a grain of sand, then it can be millions of grains of sand, so you can create a mountain, right?
yeah,
In the end, people need to think that they shouldn't think about it's only a single person. I mean,
yeah,
that might be you, but it can be other like you around the world. And if
yeah,
you all put in, then you're starting to see some results.
yeah, exactly. And so, if each person on the planet, again, there's 80 million people in the fossil fuel industry out of 8 billion on the planet. So if the other 8 billion people say, nope, I'm not going to support this industry that's trying to kill me,
Yeah,
right, anymore, right, then we can solve the problem. We still have time. It's a slim chance, right? We've only got a 14% chance to avoid the iceberg. But if everybody says enough is enough and spends money wisely, advocates, one thing I will caution though, like there are these climate activists who are going out and destroying artwork. Don't do that, right? Don't destroy a beautiful work of art, right? Get out there and inform people. Get out there and fight misinformation, and
right.
do everything legally,
Yeah,
because the voice is important. And if somebody ends up in jail or destroys a precious work of art, that's detrimental. It turns everybody away from you
from the
know
objective.
from
Yeah,
the objective, right?
yeah,
So don't do that. Don't break the law, right? Get out there, advocate, educate people, share the information that gets you riled up, right? Like share the information and inform people and talk to people, right? But don't destroy property. Don't, like, that doesn't do anything except alienate people, right? Like do it the right way, and if we all inform each other, if we all say enough, we've got the solutions we need already. Like I said, buy the electric vehicle, buy an electric stovetop. Don't fly unless you need to. Um, you know, and for the project financiers, just stop supporting fossil fuel projects. Support the good stuff, and we can still avert the iceberg, right? Um, but that's what needs to happen. We all need to wake up and realize we've only got 5 years left to
yeah.
cut carbon emissions 50%. We've wasted 50 years where we knew this problem was coming, and now we've only got 5 years left, right? So get your act together, do everything you can do as an individual, right? Like in starting Sponsor, I turned down a job leading project finance across Europe and Asia for one of the world's biggest renewable energy companies. That's my dream job. That's what I've been working working towards for the last 13 years. And I
Right.
decided to focus on Sponsor instead because I think without a platform like Sponsor, humanity probably isn't going to make it, right? With Sponsor, I can make the project financiers more efficient. We can get more deals into the market, and I can support a lot more deals than I would otherwise be able to, right? And so, I turned down my dream job and sacrificed, even 10 years ago, I sacrificed a lot of income to focus entirely on renewable energy, right? And so if I can do that, other people can too. And if enough people do it,
Yeah,
right, then we've got enough raindrops in the bucket that, people can have a drink, right?
of
And we
course.
can avert the worst. So it's up to us, right? We can still do this if everybody does their part, right?
I mean, there's also a lot of meat. I mean, some obviously come from fossil fuel companies. Just to clarify this part,
Mhm.
how would you respond? Who argues against decarbonization or say there isn't enough money?
Yeah, and so that gets back to what I was saying earlier, right? Like, what are you talking about? There's not enough money. There's 4.5 quadrillion dollars floating around in the global economy every year. It's 10
Right.
cents out of every $100, and it
Yeah.
doesn't need to come from government budgets. It can come from project finance. There's more money chasing these deals than there are good deals in the market, right? Like every time that there's a bankable deal in the market, banks fall all over themselves trying to get into the deal, right? It's almost comical, right? And so everybody wants to get into the good deals, and the problem is unless you know somebody, you're not going to get into a deal like Vineyard Wind, right? And so it's not a lack of money. It's not a lack of interest from the investing community. Renewable energy projects, if they're well structured, are almost a guaranteed return, and in some cases are basically a guaranteed return, and range anywhere from 8% to 24%. Like so, from a risk return perspective, they're some of the best investments you can make on the planet right now, right? Like no volatility like the stock market, right? As long as the person operating the project, operates the project properly, then you're pretty much guaranteed that return with no market volatility or anything like that. You could just print money every year, which is why the biggest companies in the world are investing in these projects, right? It's a good
Right.
return,
Right. Right.
right?
So
And
in
and
the
so
end, we're talking about just it's really a matter of will
yeah,
to make this change, right?
yeah, it's up to choice, right? It's up to personal choice on an individual level. So the fossil fuel industry can lobby all at once. The fossil fuel industry can try and misinform people all at once. But if people stop listening to like propaganda pieces and instead start getting informed and start making decisions that are good for them, right? Like, do you want to get lung cancer? I don't think so. So why are you, continuing to support the fossil fuel industry, right? Do things that make sense for you as an individual. And the world shifting to renewables is good for you. It means more jobs, lower energy bills, right? A future where civilization survives, right? So put your support into that. And if you hear somebody who is like trapped in this misinformation bubble that the fossil fuel industry has created around humanity, pop the bubble, right, and say, no, what you're saying is not actually what the data shows, right? Here's the data. Here are the facts, and help inform people, right, and combat the misinformation and make conscious decisions that are good for you, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Michael, you highlighted that there's only 100,000 project financiers experts globally.
Yeah.
They're trying to make some difference. Deals to happen. I
Yep.
mean, what role can these people play?
Yeah. So these people can play several roles. The first is by uh, leading, right? So these people can be leaders. There's an incredible, the knowledge that these people have is incredibly valuable and powerful. And a couple years back, there was a group of lawyers in the United Kingdom who basically all signed a letter and said, we're not supporting fossil fuel projects anymore, right? The entire project finance industry, the experts in this space, did that and took the leadership step. The rest of the world would notice. The rest of the world would have to notice. So these people can be leaders. They can also be mentors and educators, right? Like this knowledge is valuable. We need to triple the number of project financiers in the world really, really quickly. And so these people can share the knowledge and wisdom and, like, what are you going to do? Are you going to be culpable in the deaths of 5 billion people in the future, right? Is that what you want to be a part of, or do you want to be a part of saving those lives and making the world a better place for everyone? So these people can be the solution to this problem in a big way by teaching people what they know, sharing the information, saying, here's how you structure a good project, getting more people up to speed so that we can get more deals in the market. And these people can really be heroes, right? Right now, far too many of them are choosing to be villains, whether they realize it or not, right? But these people could be heroes. They can be leaders. And I made the decision 10 years ago. It was a lot harder back then to make this decision. Right now, there's plenty of opportunity, and there just needs to be more of these people focused on getting the good deals structured, right? And that to me, it's a choice, right? What you choose to put your time into, that's going to be your legacy.
What would you say? I mean, are there needs, in changing the actual project finance to accelerate, the climate investments, or
I,
these are just the structural problems?
yeah, no. So, we need to be doing things a lot more efficiently in the project finance space. So, there's a lot of stuff that could be standardized that is not standardized. It's bespoke because people are afraid that if it gets standardized, that means they're going to be out of work. That's not the case. We need to, again, triple the number of deals in the market. So we need to standardize things to make that happen, right? And, we need to work towards a best practice understanding and sort of implement that as quickly as possible across the world. And so you're going to get more deals to work on, not less. And unless you have, unless things are more efficient in the industry, you're never going to be able to support enough deals. And if you don't support enough deals, then humanity goes off the cliff, right? And so the money doesn't matter. The short-term money doesn't matter. It's the long-term results that matter,
Of course.
right? Yeah. And so, share your knowledge, work towards, don't be afraid of doing things more efficiently, right? Embrace technology. So with Sponsor, we're leveraging AI. And I can't go into too much detail publicly, but we're going to make it easier for these folks to get a lot more deals done, right? So, we want to enable this multiplication of the number of projects in the market, and in order to make that happen, we have to embrace standardization and technology,
Right.
which is fine because the stuff that can be standardized is really boring anyway and is pretty boilerplate. So just standardize it and then focus your time and valuable knowledge on solving the critical problems, which are more interesting anyway, right? And then you can get more deals done, and you get you're solving the problem, right? And so it's a technology thing, it's a process issue, it is a human resources issue and a knowledge gap issue, more than money or technology or anything like that.
So, I mean, what would you think that project, financiers should be doing differently that they are doing at the moment?
Yeah. So number one, stop doing any fossil fuel deals. Like that's the easiest thing, right? Focus your attention on, getting more climate mitigation projects in place. If you haven't done so already, reach out to Sponsor. We're trying to bring the industry together and do the work that needs to be done in order to get three times as many deals into the market as we have now. And start working towards, rather than doing things on a project by project basis, try and look at what do we need to do from an industry perspective to enable, the industry to actually do more deals, right? So think critically, stop thinking short term, think long term, and help us solve these problems, right? We've solved a lot of the problems when we launched Sponsor in March. But there's going to still be more work to be done, and we need all hands on deck right now, right? So, join forces with us. We're set up in such a way that we can, partner with people really easily and help people do meaningful work to actually solve the climate crisis.
So to continue, this same gap, what strategies can be redirected from financing fossil fuels to, climate mitigation? And are there policy to be changed or incentives needed for the people general knowledge?
So at this point, I'll talk about incentives first, right? So again, most of the subsidies in the world are going to the fossil fuel industry. So this is a myth when people say, we're subsidizing renewable energy. That's why it's so cheap. It's like, no, we're subsidizing fossil fuels way more than we are subsidizing renewable energy, right? So you don't actually need incentives help, right? Like they're great, right? So effectively, renewable energy is free under the Inflation Reduction Act for new facilities that get built due to the tax subsidies, right? But you don't necessarily need these subsidies in order for the industry to be competitive with fossil fuels. What you need to do is we need to implement like a carbon tax or a global carbon price that actually reflects the social cost of carbon, so that the fossil fuel industry will stop free riding on people's health and will instead have to allocate the costs that it's burdening society with right now. That gets put into the price of the fossil fuels. So a carbon tax or a carbon price is something that the fossil fuel industry has been saying publicly it supports, but in reality lobbies against every time there's a concerted effort to actually implement a carbon price, right? If you had, I just, what does a carbon price look like? Okay, so imagine you go to get gas at the gas station. If there was a carbon price that accurately captured the social cost of carbon, your gasoline would cost at least 3 times as much, possibly as much as 15 times as much. Right? Would you be, using gasoline? No, you'd get an electric vehicle as soon as you could. Right? Life cycle cost of ownership, even without a social cost of carbon, the life cycle cost of owning an electric vehicle is already cheaper. Right? And your electricity bill, anything coming from the fossil fuel industry would be like 20 or 30 cents a kilowatt hour in the US versus, 7 or cents a kilowatt hour is what, the subsidized cost is right now. Right. And so if we actually, the market would correct itself and people would just stop spending money on this stuff naturally if we actually had a carbon price. But instead of paying a carbon price at the pump or whatever, we're paying it with our health and premature deaths and, all these major storms causing billions of dollars of damage and, eventually the collapse of society. Right. So,
Michael, sorry for interrupting you.
Yeah.
There's some comments, just to go through some of them. So Rahat Mohammed is, thanking for us to have a neat discussion. It's very insightful. So thank you, Rahat. And Tim Williamson, he says, half the growth for renewables is needed in places with political risk. How do we bridge and edge the risk?
Yeah, so that's a great question, right? So this gets into the structuring perspective, and so there's this stuff called political risk insurance. Other entities like JBIC call it like partial credit guarantees and things like this, right? So there is political risk insurance available, and so if you structure the project properly, so let's say there's a country where the utility is not investment grade rated. And the government is not investment grade rated, can you still get a deal done? The answer is yes, right? We've done it. I've done it, right? I've structured projects where you can get the deal done using political risk insurance. You just need to structure it properly, right? So we have the tools available to structure these projects and to unlock this capital from the private sector, but not enough people understand it and know how to do it properly, so that you minimize the impact to the government budget, so that you enable the banks to actually lend into the deals, right? But you can absolutely avail of these tools and still, even if there's political risk, you can still get the deal done.
Right, right. So, continuing, you mentioned that there's more money, changing from newer projects that they are bankable. What needs to happen to scale up bankable projects?
Yeah, so exactly what I'm talking about, right? We need to, um, we need to standardize more stuff. We need to, rather than reinventing the wheel every single project, we need to replicate what works. So I'll give you an example. I shouldn't probably say specific names. So there's a country in Southeast Asia that wanted to build a couple of electric generation facilities. Back when I was at SMBC, that
Right,
country had successfully financed a similar project about 2 years previously, right? And rather than simply copying what had been done successfully with that project in order to do the future projects, the government decided to reinvent the wheel. And so it took another 8 years to negotiate everything to get it into a bankable state, right? That's a huge waste of time and effort and energy. They could have just did what worked in the first place and had the projects built like years ago, right? And this happens all over the place, right? So, figure out what works in a given country and in a given context, and then just replicate that, right? And get as many projects as are needed into the market as quickly as possible, right? And this is something that sponsor and the team, we've put together. We've got 20 great people now, even though we're a startup, and we're supporting billions of dollars worth of climate mitigation projects and helping them get into a good state. So if you don't know how to structure a project, or you've got a project that you need help structuring, like, reach out to us. That's what we're here for. We're here to solve the climate funding gap and get more bankable projects into the market. So that's what we do, right?
right, right.
So reach out to us, and I'm happy to share knowledge. If you're working for a government, I'm happy to teach you how project finance works and how you can access the capital markets, all of that. So we can do this.
We know that there has been, for many, many years, a lot of misinformation and influence, of course. What challenges have you faced personally, for speaking out regarding this subject?
Yeah, so like I said, making the decision to publicly say no more fossil fuels 10 years ago
Yeah,
resulted in a whole lot of backlash, right? So I had a company tried to destroy my business. I've been physically attacked on numerous occasions. I've had close friends, basically, who it's difficult to convince a person of something when his or her paycheck depends on not understanding the thing, right? And so I've had very close friends who like to rationalize their continued involvement in fossil fuel projects, like get very hostile with me, and things like that, when I'm just trying to provide information, right? And it's good data, and it's actually for everybody's best interest, even the fossil fuel industry, right? Like, I tried about 5 years ago or whatever to contact the CEO I did contact the CEO of Shell, and
yeah,
told him my thoughts, and like, it's in the fossil fuel industry's best interest to embrace renewable energy too, right?
we,
Like,
we,
that's
we
all
have
benefit.
we have very similar history. From my point of view, I didn't reach physical, but in the end, goes back to the same root. I mean, we are doing good, and we get violence and hate for it. I mean, it's
Yeah,
totally out of understanding, right?
yeah, yeah. And it's unfortunate, because we're actually, the advice that I give is actually in everybody's interest, including the fossil fuel industry, right? Because they're going to go bankrupt if they don't shift to renewable energy. Like, that's the end result, right? One way or the other. Either society goes off a cliff, they have no customers, or they get pushed out of business by the superior technology, just like the buggy manufacturers did.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, it's in everybody's best interest to decarbonize as quickly as possible. And so, I've sacrificed a lot and, been through a lot to keep trying to just inform people and make the world a better place. And I'm going to keep fighting, right? Because I know it's the right thing to do. The science agrees with me. The data agrees with me. And, I don't want to see other families going through what my family did and having a parent die from lung cancer. Right?
I mean, in the end, it's about what we want for ourselves. I mean, do we want our grandchildren to grow up or not to grow up? I mean,
Yeah.
it's a matter of thinking in the future. I mean, if you want to think in at least another 50 years, you should think thoroughly that these changes needed to happen. Because if they don't happen, there's nothing to save after that, right?
But this is not and this is the thing that I need to emphasize, though, right? This is not a long-term issue anymore. We're experiencing the climate crisis right now. Los Angeles was on fire, right? And we've got record temperatures every year. We've got these huge storms that are supposed to be once in 1,000 year that are happening on an annual basis, right? This is now. We need to decide now. We ran the clock down, and we're in the final minutes, right? The doomsday clock, which is maintained by the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, which was created by people like Einstein, right? The brightest minds on the planet, say we're, 89 seconds to midnight, which is the end of human civilization, right? And so we're at the wire, folks, and we need to act right now.
Yeah. It's unfortunate that humanity keeps on pushing one of his other motives, which is don't try to do the same thing expecting a different result, right? So it goes back to to this smart man, and we had all the advices, and we have really the information that we just need to look better or just ask for it. In the end, it's so it is. If you're not sure, just ask for it or look it up yourself. In the end, when you match a lot of data together, eventually you find out, the exactly same result of this conversation. In the end, the data is there, and people can travel to, to these countries already, especially during summertime. I did, and I can assure you that you cannot sustain yourself out on the street. It's not possible. And this is the advice I give everyone. Start thinking if that's really want for yourself, or you really want to get into a path to make this decision of changing, right?
Yeah, and people are deciding, right? There's no I don't want to get involved or this is a political. This is not a
everyone is already involved. We all
everybody, we're on the planet. We're on the Titanic together. We're in the same boat together. We're all deciding each and every day by the choices we make, right? And so it's not a political issue; it's a physics issue. And so you're choosing whether you want to choose or not, right? So make the right choice.
Exactly. How do you say finance professionals, how they navigate pushback, risks, or industry pressure, let's just say? I mean, of course, there's a lot of difference of interests and opinions. How do you say to them how to handle that?
Yeah, I would say avoid arguments, right? So if somebody's getting really hostile, there's no point. The person's getting emotional or whatever. So look for a time to have the conversation when somebody's calm and because people like to rationalize and have cognitive bias and things like that. So it's a process to change opinions and get people the information so that people have good information to make decisions on, right? So don't let things get hostile. Go from a place of kindness and wanting to help other people, have good intentions, right? And stand your ground, You don't need to like holler or anything like that. You can just say no, like, no, I'm sorry, I don't do fossil fuels, right? And I know you do, and I understand your decisions, right? I disagree, and I'm not going to do it anymore, right? And
Yeah.
be kind, and try and go from a place of wanting to help other people, and just do what you know is
What I would say, just to complement Michael, I think from my perspective, I always say, because I'm very straightforward and I don't like, avoiding discussions or conflict. So I just say what you really want for your future and for yourself.
yeah,
Because in the end, there has to be an answer, right? If you are on fossil fuels, what result are you going to get?
yeah,
So
exactly.
I
What
think
future do you
that
want?
finish the actual discussion and make people starting to think that the change is really needed, to get into a sustainable way, and for you at least to have a light to the future, right?
Yeah, yeah. And what kind of a world do you want to hand your kids? Do you want to hand your kids a world that looks like something out of a Mad Max movie, or do you want
Yeah, yeah.
to give them a world that looks better than the one that you inherited? You know, so yeah, do the right thing, right? And think long term. Um, yeah. So I apologize. We're about 5 minutes over the time, and I'm actually late for another call. So can we wrap
Yeah, we can just wrap it up. I mean, what else would you say, to people for them to actually start thinking in changing? And just release a power message. I always ask to my guests to say a power message before they leave.
Yeah, you have more power than you think you do, right? And your decisions and choices matter, right? So get informed. Don't listen to people who are receiving money from the fossil fuel industry to spout propaganda. Look into the data, right? And then decide what future you want. Look at the MIT limits to growth model. There's multiple pathways there. Which pathway, ask yourself, which pathway would you rather be on? And then act accordingly, right? Do you
Right.
want that future where 5 billion people die? Or do you want the future where humanity is prosperous, where we have 22 million new jobs, where energy is cheaper, where less people are dying, right? Which future do you want? And then act accordingly. That includes who you vote for, that includes what you buy, that includes what you spend your time on. You have power, right? And we can still win this fight. We can steer the Titanic away from the iceberg. We just need to seize the tiller and do it.
And with that, I think we wrapped it up for today. Michael, thank you so much for this was very insightful. I think many people will get a clear idea that the actual, climate change, it's real, and for people to have real data and information enough for starting to think that it's needed to change into sustainable path and to get a better future, of course.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure, and people can reach out and sign up for our newsletter, or whatever on the website, worldwidewebs.sponsorgo.com. And if you want to get involved, let me know, and we'll try and find a way to get you involved. We're all in this fight together, so we need to join forces. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Michael. Appreciate it. Thank you. That was all for today. I appreciate it, Michael. Thank you. See you soon.
Take care.
Bye
Yep.
bye.